Awesome. Thank you so much, Cole. Welcome everyone to our first Mentor Monday of 2021. I read somewhere recently that like 2021 reads like 2021, like WON, but we'll hopefully change that as this year keeps going. So before we kind of really dive deeper, we want to do a land acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather has been and still is the traditional territory of several Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. Since the immemorial, numerous Indigenous nations and Indigenous peoples have lived and passed through this territory. We recognize this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and the Two-Row Wapum Treaty, which emphasizes the importance of joint stewardship, peace, and respectful relationships. Sheridan affirms it is our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We're grateful for the opportunity to be working and living on this land. So moving on, so just want to mention welcome to everyone who just in. So I'm Besma Soltan. I am the program lead of VenturED, which acts as the connection between EDGE and entrepreneurship and Sheridan curriculum. And so a lot of my work is more on the internal side of Sheridan, with a lot of faculty members and the students. Behind the scenes, we have the wonderful Cole Arnett, who is doing an amazing job coordinating things and making things super smooth and thinking of every little thing. So thanks a lot, Cole. And just want to remind you all that for Zoom, there is a chat feature that you can use where you are able to either message everyone if you have like a general question for all, or you can also, if you click on the chat and then click on the a drop-down menu comes where you can select the name of the person if you want to message someone privately. So if you want to grab someone's email, for example, to network with that person after the session, you can do that there. And sharing audio and video. So if you are able, it'll be wonderful to see everyone's faces, but I already got one person who messaged said due to tech issues, you know, they're gonna have to keep their cameras off. So it'll be great to see each other's faces if you can, and if you want to. Just a reminder, we are recording the session. And so if there is an issue about that from your end, please drop Cole an email afterwards to discuss that. So moving on, so our agenda for today, EDGE Welcome and Introductions, which is what we're currently doing. And then we'll go into the Work Integrated Learning presentation. That's what WIL stands for, by Cory and Katie, and then Q&A. So just a quick intro about EDGE for anyone who's not an EDGE member or who's very new to EDGE. So EDGE is Sheridan's entrepreneurship community, and EDGE stands for Entrepreneurship Discovery and Growth Engine. We are an impact-focused startup incubator that offers resources, mentorship, community, training, and more for early-stage entrepreneurs and change makers. Building on Sheridan's world-renowned culture of creativity, EDGE provides support to entrepreneurs and change makers at Sheridan and in the community. EDGE is proud to support sole proprietors, side hustlers, social entrepreneurs, not-for-profit leaders, globally scalable tech ventures, and everything in between. We have 4 tiers of programming, as you can see on the screen. So I'm sure some of you would be more familiar with those as your members in them. So going from Explore, which covers ideation, generating ideas and exploring entrepreneurship, all the way to Soar, which focuses on efficiency of your venture, growing the venture and refining it and growing traction. And so if you are not an EDGE member yet, you can consider joining whichever one of these makes most sense to you. And if you're not sure, again, drop us an email and we can help you figure that out. So with us on the first Mentor Monday of the year today is Cory Latimer, Associate Director of Cooperative and Career Education at Sheridan College, and Katie Kelly, Associate Director of Employment Relations and Business Development at the college, at Sheridan College. So I'm going to pass it on to them from this point to kind of talk more about their roles, and we'll switch PowerPoints to their PowerPoint. So off to you, Cory and Katie.
Thank you, Besma. And it was really interesting to see that image of me, because it does feel like at least a lifetime ago, if not longer, that I last saw or attempted a suit and or tie. So we'll probably go up in size next time that's required. But thanks everybody for joining us on a Monday evening. So Katie and I are going to walk through a little bit of information for you. We're hoping to get some feedback from you in the, hey, Cory, this is something we already know, or let's slow down and spend some time on this. We do intend this to be as interactive as possible. Let me move this box out of the way. And we are intending to save as much time as we can for some questions and answer on the end as well. Katie, do you want to maybe start by just kind of an introduction of yourself and kind of your new priorities?
Sure. Again, thank you, Besma and team, for welcoming us today, and to everyone who's taking the time to participate in this session. We are so happy to have you here with us. As it's been mentioned, I am the Associate Director of Employer Relations and Business Development. So what that means is I love to talk to people like yourselves and to help communicate the benefits of working with Sheridan and hiring our student talent, as well as the various funding options that are available to you, so that you can do so with as much support from a wage incentive perspective as possible. So Cory and I work very closely together between the employers and the students to ensure that we're finding good opportunities, good matches between employers and students, so that both parties find it a highly beneficial experience.
That's great. Thanks, Katie. So I'm Cory Latimer. My new job title is Associate Director, Cooperative and Career Education. So my role focuses on the student preparation for job search. So we run a preparatory course of resumes and cover letters and interviews and those sorts of pieces, as well as the one-on-one support that we provide to co-op students seeking work, and all of our students throughout their Sheridan education and as they approach graduation as well. So some of you might have interfaced with Sheridan, where I was kind of the manager of cooperative education. And as you can imagine, co-op's a big thing. It's got students, it's got employers, it's got jobs, it's got all kinds of pieces. So we have moved to a more functional setup where Katie is going to be the primary lead on things that are employer outreach related, whereas I'm going to keep an eye on the student curriculum through work integrated learning. Most importantly, maybe though, is, and one of the things I love working with entrepreneurs on, is they tend to be incredible connectors. So Katie and I are hoping to do our best entrepreneur impression this evening and act as connectors for you. So where you want to look at, how do I hire a grad? How do I hire a co-op student? That falls right neatly into what we do each and every day. But there are so many other ways that you might choose to interface with Sheridan students, whether it's guest speaking, whether it's capstone projects, whether it's applied research. And while some of that doesn't fall exactly into our portfolio, we recognize that Sheridan's a big place, whether we walk into it or we just kind of virtually log into it. It's a big place either way, with a lot of different connection points, a lot of different people, a lot of different programs. So our hope is, at the very least, at the end of this evening's presentation, you'll have a couple names. So if you're ever unclear as to where to go with a specific inquiry, you can always send it our way, and we will do our best to make sure it gets to where it needs to go. So bear with me while there we go, a strike one. So we put together the briefest of agendas shown here. But again, we do want to make sure that we are spending most of our time on the question and answer, item number 8, and we do think there's a lot of interest in number 5 around wage subsidies and funding support. So we'll make sure that we roll to that quickly as well. I think I was going to do this one, Katie. So I just wanted to, terminology in the space is often tricky. I find myself tripping over the different words that are used to describe some things, but ultimately experiential learning is the phrase that you'll hear in Ontario and across Canada for anything really that is learning by doing. So when a program has a course and that course requires the students to do a group project with a real world industry partner, that would be a form of experiential learning. If the students are in a class and they are learning by doing some sort of a simulation, that is experiential learning. Even research is experiential learning. Another subset of experiential learning is work integrated learning. It's a different type of experiential learning, but it's a type where the student is learning really by something that approximates employment. The most common and well-known of those is co-op, where students are working usually full-time hours, 35, 40 hours a week during a semester where they don't have any classes. They are just working throughout that semester. Now, it is an academic activity. They have assignments. They get a grade for it. And most co-op positions are paid positions. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there's other forms of work integrated learning too. So some of you may have worked with our social service worker program or early childhood education program that have what we describe as field placements, students working 2 to 3 days a week, usually unpaid, while at the same time taking courses on the other 2 to 3 days a week. So it's another model that you'll sometimes see, and towards the medical and those fields, you'll sometimes see something called clinical placement. So those are things students are doing while they are students. So they're students while they are participating in these employment or employment-like experiences, all of which leads, hopefully, to their employment upon graduation. So with co-op as an example, we've often surveyed or asked our employers about the benefits of participation in co-op, and they are certainly many. But one that we hear most often is co-op is like the world's best job interview. The opportunity to work with a student full-time hours for 4 months, allow them to learn your processes, your protocols, to see how they fit with the team, to assess their abilities. It makes hiring a new full-time or contract employee once they graduate so much less risky to have had all of that previous experience. So we can certainly today help you to navigate all of the above as best we can. So just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview of that. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Cory. So we thought it might be beneficial to just do a very high-level overview of the various faculties and schools of business that offer co-op and internship programs. I should mention there's over 50 programs with co-op and internships involved. So there are many, but like I said, we'll just do a very high-level overview here, starting with the Faculty of Applied Science and Technology. So these programs range from applied computing to mechanical and electrical engineering, chemical and environmental, and architectural technology. And if you have any questions about any of these, of course, we're happy to address those towards the end. We also have the Pilon School of Business. So that covers programs from accounting and finance, human resources, marketing and advertising, and supply chain, international business, project management, and process and analysis. And just to note, many employers also hire students from multiple faculties, programs, and streams to support their needs. So for example, one might hire 3 students to provide support in HR, accounting, and applied computing. So there are a range of courses and programs to choose from.
And the other thing we didn't indicate on here is multiple credential levels as well. So when you see these list of programs, we have them in diplomas, we have degrees. And a major thing we want to reiterate today is that Sheridan offers a huge number of degrees. So while you might be accustomed to thinking of degrees as kind of the purview of the universities, we have our BBA degrees running, mobile computing degrees, interaction design degrees. So all of that. And when you see the list at the bottom, international business, project management, process analysis, some of these are graduate certificates. They're about 1 year in length, but when the students come to us, they often already have a previous diploma or degree, as well as in many cases, some work experience. So we have different disciplines for you to choose from, but we also have different levels of kind of academic and experiential seniority to explore as well. There we go.
Thank you. We also have the Faculty of Animation, Arts, and Design. So some programs that come to mind here are animation and game design, illustration, photography, interaction design, craft and design, film and television, and interior design. As well as the Faculty of Applied Health and Community Studies, so athletic therapy and kinesiology students, early childhood education, leadership, community safety and police foundations, and social service workers. For Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, we also have creative writing and publishing. So there is more information about this on the co-op portion of the Sheridan website. But of course, we're here to explain as much information to you as possible today. But if you want to follow up with that, you can look on the site. And like I said, we can address any questions when we get to Q&A as well. Okay, so why engage? There are many wonderful reasons that we could tell you to choose Sheridan and choose our students. So some of the more obvious reasons: to vet future full-time employees, to allow for fresh training, creativity, and enthusiasm. There are the Ontario Co-op tax credit and other funding supports, and to contribute to student development and education. And I may come with a little bit of bias when I say Sheridan has the best of the best, but we also have some backup to that as well. So we have several students that have won prestigious Canadian and Ontario Co-op awards year after year. For example, Shauna K. Jones, a former Sheridan student and award recipient, who is also to this day a co-op advocate and an entrepreneur. And in regards to the funding that I mentioned, Cory will get into the various funding options that are currently available. He'll get into that deeper in just a moment.
That's great. And Shauna, thanks, Besma. I was going to mention Shauna, also a very proud EDGE member and mentor. So it's amazing how those things all have a way of coming together. Okay, so we've got a few different financial supports that are now available. We're going to walk through them quickly and then pause for questions. So the one that's been around for probably the longest period of time is the Ontario Cooperative Education Tax Credit. Goes up to a maximum of $3,000. And one of the things that we love about the tax credit is our international students qualify for this, as do our domestic students. So it's a little bit more equitable across the board than some of the other funding options. So effectively what happens is an employer can hire a student, they pay them an hourly wage throughout their work term. And then when you're filing your taxes at the end of the fiscal year, there is an area where you can fill out claims for the cooperative education tax credit per student. There's a formula to calculate it. So they look at what is your standard payroll, how much did the student make, and then they apply a formula to calculate the amount of tax credit, which would then reduce taxes payable at the end of the year. Most of the employers that we have talked to get the $3,000 or very close to it through the tax credit, but it does require the company to kind of be able to support those wages throughout the work term. The benefit is at tax time. The second one, you may have heard rumblings of. This is money that the federal government started budgeting for a few years back, called the Student Work Placement Program, or SWIP for short. So when the program launched, the government assigned a number of industry associations to administer this wage subsidy program. So there are a couple of industry associations related to information technology and IT. So ICTC, the Information Communication Technology Council, as well as Technation and a few others that are focused on IT. There are some that are focused on manufacturing. There are others that are focused on different sectors. And there are some that are not sector specific. So the subsidies are actually administered by these outside associations, although we built really close relationships with each of them. And I also chair, we have a national association for cooperative and work integrated learning, and I chair the subcommittee that liaises with ESDC, the federal agency that administers SWIP and all of the SWIP partners. So we're fairly up to date on how this program works. Generally speaking, the program, when it launched, said it would cover 50 to 70% of a student's wages. So 50% up to $5,000 for all students, or 70% of wages up to $7,000 for underrepresented groups. In and amongst COVID and what's been going on, the government recognized that there was need for greater support more than ever. So they've increased that to 75% of student wages, regardless of whether or not the student fits into any of their defined underrepresented groups. That is true for the winter semester, so January through to April, for co-op or other forms of work integrated learning. There is an active discussion going on as to whether that emergency measure to increase the percentage of wages that will be paid to 75 will continue into the summer and into next year. So as soon as we get an update on that, we will let you know. But we know the program overall will continue. We know at minimum for the summer and beyond, it will offer 50 to 70% of wages. What we don't yet know is the 75. So we're waiting for an update on that. One of the unfortunate elements of this program is the federal funds are earmarked for domestic students only, so our international students do not qualify. But we are happy to act as a point of connection for you to maybe the industry association that is most appropriate for your organization and the nature of the work that you're doing. I'll do maybe one more and then we'll pause for questions. So the province had a funding program that they called the Career Ready Auto Stream. And Sheridan was part of a 7-school consortium that applied to this fund and through it gained the ability to issue wage subsidies for employers in the automotive sector that we are calling drivability. So effectively, this wage subsidy program offers $3,000 per student, or $5,000 if the student identifies as having a disability. Our international students are eligible for this one as well. And one of the benefits that we have here is this program is quote unquote stackable with the tax credit. So it is possible for an employer to hire a student, receive the $3,000 subsidy, and then report the money they paid out of pocket when claiming the cooperative education tax credit and get up to $3,000 more, depending on how all that math works out. This one's limited to the automotive or advanced manufacturing sectors only, so we're happy to help you navigate that as well. And these subsidies are coming not from an industry association, but directly from Sheridan College. So where the work experience is a work integrated learning experience, it's a co-op, it's something the students are getting grades for, or one of the benefits of this one, this is the only one that is also eligible for supporting the hiring of recent graduates as well, but again, only for the automotive and advanced manufacturing sectors. So those are the three that we're seeing our employer partners rely on most heavily of late. And of those, I suspect that the SWIP program is the most appealing. So why don't I pause from sharing screen just for a moment, because it helps me to feel reassured I'm not just talking to myself to see you all again for a moment. And just pause to see maybe whether we've triggered some questions as it relates to wage subsidy funding. And then we'll maybe turn back to the presentation to cover our last few slides there before we go to a full free-for-all on Q&A. Any wage subsidy comments or questions?
I have a few questions. I am a loyal supporter of Sheridan students. I did hire some co-op students previously, and I had a great experience with them. So I'm just with the workplace program. I guess my first question would be: are there still students looking for winter co-ops right now? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
there are. So the impact of COVID on the labor market has been significant, and our students have not been spared what everybody else is going through in terms of really difficult times. So we are actively advocating for every little bit of help and support for our students that we can possibly attain. Now, one of the things our team can help you walk through is not all programs and not all students are available in all 3 semesters. So often there's a question of, is the student group I'm looking for available at this time of year? And we can help navigate that. But we are well below where we would normally be for our winter semester. So still have a number of students seeking work terms for the January to April semester. We are also, as a kind of a response to COVID, willing to entertain fewer hours. So normally there's a minimum number of hours of 360 or so that a co-op work term requires. Where we need to be flexible with that to meet maybe your needs and kind of other needs, we're happy to do that as well. The name of the game lately has been agility and flexibility for sure.
For sure. That's great. Thank you.
And Cory, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the SWIP funding, wasn't it as long as a student starts a position prior to end of March, they can receive the increased funding into May?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things that we were worried about is the government's fiscal year end kind of ends March, April. So they had guaranteed 75% of wages until the end of March. And we said, well, what if someone hired a student from January to the end of April? Does the amount drop from 75% to 50% in March 31st? So they listened, which is nice. And decided that the reasonable answer was, as long as the students started by March 31st, they would honor the 75% until the student's work term ended, provided it ended no later than May 31st. Now, it's unusual for us for a work term to cross that time period. Usually by kind of the middle of May, they're into their summer courses and what have you. But you're right, Katie, there is some additional flexibility there that as long as they start by March 31st, that 75% threshold of wage subsidy would continue.
And how is that wage subsidy like distributed? Is it like a check to the employer? Is it a credit at the end of the year?
Yeah, so it's a payment directly to the employer. One of the things, Cole's recording the session, but I will say what I think anyway. One of the obstacles in this, we can edit this later, right, Cole? Anyway, one of the things that is sometimes a source of consternation with this program is, although it is one program, it's administered by all these different industry associations. So as you can imagine, they've all kind of interpreted the rules a little bit differently. They've all brought it to life a little bit differently. So one of the things we hope to be able to do is help you navigate some of that. So for example, one of the government's COVID measures and emergency measures was employers need to access some of the wage subsidy before the work term is done. So not everyone can afford to pay a student for 4 full months and then wait for their subsidy check to come in. So we'll maybe allow at the halfway point 50% or something like that. So ESDC announced that. And then all of the industry partners or all of the industry associations kind of said, wait, how do we do that? Aren't we taking on some risk? What if the company doesn't come through? What if something bad happens? What if the student quits? So whether they have all embraced that and to what degree, to be perfectly honest, varies. But what I've heard from some of the funders is if they need to have a discussion with an organization around that, they will. So what we might do is actually facilitate a call with one of these funders to say, look, I've got a student lined up. I can hire them right now, but the only way it's going to work is if I can access a portion of this subsidy before the work term is over, and we try and negotiate that on a more of a case by case. But otherwise, generally, it would be the work term ends at the end of 4 months. There's some pay stubs and other documents that would be collected and shared with the funder, and then they would issue the subsidy directly to the employer afterwards.
I had one last question, and I almost forgot it. Do you have to apply to be a part? Like, as the employer, do I have to like apply to have a student in this position?
For the funders?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a couple application forms. One's an employer form, one's a student form. In my experience, they approve everyone. There's not a lot of red tape blocking approval, generally speaking. And they do vary as to whether you can or cannot have found the student already. So some of them would like you to kind of have the job approved and then go find a student. Others are quite happy if you say, here's my job, here's my student, make it happen. We could help negotiate that as well. But their approval process effectively is like legitimate companies with legitimate jobs. They check the student to make sure they're domestic students. But ultimately, they're under significant pressure to get the subsidies out the door. So generally speaking, I've not seen a lot of obstacle to any particular employer, unless it were working through a funder that requires you to be part of a certain sector and they feel that you don't meet that definition. But again, I've noticed nothing but flexibility from the funders in that regard as well.
Thank you.
Hey, Cory, Raj here. Sorry, I just want to continue from what Maya just asked. Are there any requirements for an employer to be sort of registered technically, or like in my case, I'm part of a startup. We are still in the process of navigating those parts of registration and legalizations. But we are also trying to venture into developing the product of an MVP stage. So how does that play into your scheme of things?
Yeah, probably something I'll need to look into. Again, I suspect it's one where the funders have kind of treated it differently. There are some that are particularly risk averse, and they are terrified of issuing a wage subsidy to a company that then disappears. And I don't know what happens with that. And others have just kind of identified that, especially in dealing with the startup community, being more accommodating may be best. So I think we could find answers to that for you. One of the ones that, Raj, I might encourage you to look at is the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, OCC, is now one of the SWIP funding partners. They were one of the two most recently announced partners, and their focus tends to be a little bit more on small and mid-sized organizations. My guess is they will be the most startup friendly of some of the possible places we might work with. The other one, wow, Cole is on top of it. Thank you, Cole. He's putting links in the chat and everything. The other one worth looking at is Magnet. So for those of you that have interfaced with Magnet before, they're kind of a job matching service that actually came out of the Ryerson incubator. Being an organization that was incubated themselves in a very similar type of model, I suspect that they would have a better understanding of kind of the cycle for a startup company. And might be a really nice one to reach out to as well. So,
sorry to cut you, but are you saying that we need to engage Magnet to figure out if we are eligible to maybe hire students from Sheridan's context?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that for you. To reach out. Really, what we have to do is there's like 12 different funding partners.
Okay.
The two that do not concern themselves with what sector you're in, they can help everybody, is OCC and Magnet. So then the question we need to take to them is, let's say we've got a company that is not, well, effectively we need to look at their form and find out if it asks for a business registration number. If it doesn't, I would just move forward with the process. If it does, I'm gonna have to ask the question as to how required that actually is.
Got it, understood. Yeah, so we are actually currently in the process of signing up with Edge Rise. So that process is underway, and this session today was very timely, and so I thought it will be helpful to kind of maybe see if I can get ahead and figure out if there's some things that I can line up in advance. Thanks.
And I know it's confusing because Magnet does more than wage subsidies. Magnet also finds students and has job portals, but in this capacity, I'm talking about them as a federal funding delivery partner.
Okay, yeah, that's where I got confused, because I know Magnet is more of a job hiring portal.
Yeah, so I think what was identified was we had a bunch of funders, but they were all industry specific. And eventually someone very smart said, what about the companies that don't fit into any of those? And then Magnet stepped forward and bravely said, we'll take care of those. So they are intended to be the catch-all for those organizations that maybe don't meet any of the others. My honest instinct, though, is that the vast majority of you could make a very easy argument as it relates to funding through ICTC or Technation, which are the IT kind of funders. And even Sheridan is hired under that program by arguing the types of technologies our students will be using in their work terms. So we do have a lot of options as it relates to that.
Okay.
So then I might, I suspect we're going to be following up an email with all of you on a number of the questions that arise. And one of them is one of the questions from the chat around funding supports for recent graduates. So of the 3 that we've listed, the only that would meet that requirement would be drivability, but again, that's auto sector and advanced manufacturing only. I have in the past seen a few others that are worthy of exploration, and I'll circle back around to you on this. One is we do know that the federal government intends to expand the terms and definitions of the Canada Summer Jobs Grant this summer to kind of address COVID, and how that plays out and whether it would or would not include graduates is something I probably need to look into and get back to you on. And then there are sometimes some funding supports through like an IRAP program or a MyTax. And I am scheduled to check in with MyTax soon on some of the things that they are launching. Most of the funding that I'm most intimately interacting with, and Katie as well, is on the student employment side. We will circle back around to you on the graduate side, but I think there's less happening there. The answer to the quote unquote skills gap that we keep hearing about from the feds has often been more work integrated learning, more co-ops, so that when students graduate, they have the skills our employers need. So they've been investing in that quite significantly, but I will look into whether there are other graduate funding supports that we can maybe direct you to as well.
I just had a question about some of the grants you were talking about in the funding. Many of them, especially from the federal government, require at least two employees as well as revenues. And so I was just wondering if they're, all of the ones that you just mentioned, they do require at least 2 employees as well as the revenues.
I haven't seen it listed as an ESDC requirement. So I think what happens is each of the funders is kind of creating their own risk mitigation strategies. One of the things that my National Association Committee is going to do is to reach out to all of the funders to clarify. There is no really good central place for all this information, which is why you're stuck talking to me today. But we are, as a national association, going to collect it all and disseminate it. So what I can do is build into that template Chris's question. Is there a requirement for a minimum number of employees? Is there a kind of annual revenue figure that is required for eligibility? And if there are a few that say, no, that's not how our program works, I could direct you to that specifically. And I suspect we could get that work done in the next 3 to 4 weeks at most with all 12 funders.
May I have a question?
Yeah, Jacqueline, please.
I am on the other side of the table. I just graduated last year and I love community services. So I would like to know if my post-graduation work permit has some limitations related to any of these programs, because I'm not anymore international students that I was. I had some limitations before, but now with just the PGWP, I can work like, I don't know, some restrictions to work in a startup from Sheridan.
So does it restrict your ability to hire students and apply for funding, or is that not the question?
No. As I have the open work permits now, but you told about the programs and they are like addressing mainly students, right? So nowadays I am an alumni, and as an alumni, can I engage in some partners, any startup from EDGE?
Oh, that's a neat question. So maybe through Besma, she might be able to kind of give some information as to how you might engage with EDGE partners. But an open work permit means legally eligible to work in Canada. So you would be kind of treated much the same as any Sheridan graduate, anybody in the workforce.
Okay.
Some of the funding programs, and you did remind me of another that I should explore, may have citizenship requirements, but we'd have to look through that on a bit of a case by case. But an open work permit would mean exactly that you're eligible to work in Canada with any Canadian employer if it's truly an open work permit for the duration of the permit.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And then the other thing I can connect with you all on is our, Katie and I, our boss is Matt Rempel. He's our Director of Career Integrated Learning. And there's a division that reports to him called Community Employment Services. And they offer kind of Employment Ontario programming under the Sheridan umbrella. And they tend to also be really well connected to some funding programs that kind of impact our graduates and other kind of non-student hiring. So we'll collect that for you as well and make those connections.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jacqueline. Thank you. And I saw Crystal's polite hand there.
Thank you so much. So you might address this afterwards, but it sounds like there's just a lot of different funding options. So is it the best workflow wise? I have yet to hire a student. Is it to work with you first, since a lot of these funding opportunities required to work with a full co-op program anyways, like a co-op office? So should we just go with you first and you'll point us to the direction that we should take?
Katie, do you want to start with that?
Sure, yes, absolutely. We can work with you to identify what the best channel would be for your needs. So we're going to provide our contact information later in the presentation. We invite you to contact us about absolutely anything, and certainly to help you out about funding. We do have some homework and takeaways already from today's session that we'll circle back with you on. And we do also have handouts on the 3 wage subsidies that Cory's highlighted today. So we'll have Besma distribute those on our behalf as well. But please, never hesitate to reach out to us. Ourselves, our whole team, we're happy to help you figure this out.
Thank you, because I don't know if I'm the only one, but I said new to everything, so it'd be very helpful. I think this is great just to know what is available, so I have a good sense of how much things would cost and time in terms of calendar. I mean, when things would happen, and then yes, to work with you first to understand, how to go move forward. That's amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely, we understand it can be a bit overwhelming to take in all this information at one time, and it's a lot to digest. So.
I think that was really our core message, right? That there's Sheridan internally, large and admittedly difficult to navigate. I've tried to find my way through the site and I get easily distracted. So we know that that is a challenge, and the funding side of things has gotten even more complex. So there are really good answers and solutions to the questions that you all have. Finding them is the challenge. So I think our core message is we are happy to act as kind of the coach support partner that you need to navigate all of the above where we can. We are learning as well, but you can imagine, so Katie's got a team of job developers whose role is to go and find jobs for students. That's what they come in on Monday from 9 to 5. That's what they do Monday to Friday. It's really challenging work to do at the best of times. It's exceptionally challenging work to do during a pandemic. So the message that Katie's been giving them is, whether we like it or not, in addition to being experts in Sheridan's programming and our students and the skills that they bring and how they can help our employers, you also need to develop a degree of expertise in how to pay for it, because our employers right now are not running around with all kinds of access to funds to make this happen. But our students still require it, right? Their tuition hasn't gone away, all of those challenges. So how do we bring all those pieces together in something that's relatively easily digestible and helps everyone kind of achieve their shared goals? So that's the intent at the very least. So why don't I'm sure you're all missing the PowerPoint because we did work hard on it. So we'll put it back up on the screen, we'll wrap it up, and then we'll go into a full-fledged Q&A after that. So bear with me for a moment, please.
It is nice to see people's faces too, so that's great.
That's true. Share screen. Okay. Everybody still with me?
We're with you.
in hearts and minds and so forth. Well, here's an exciting one. Katie, do you want to start on this one?
Yes, please. So yeah, we really are excited. Just last week, we launched a new platform called Sheridan Works. It's Orbis based. You may be familiar with it if you've worked with other institutions that use this platform. And it's really wonderful. It boosts efficiency, flexibility. Though as always, you'll still have the Sheridan Co-op team here and ready to help support you if you have absolutely any questions or need a hand. So Sheridan Works, the link is up here on the slide. This is where you can register for your account. You can do your own job postings. You can review resumes, make offers, schedule interviews, all right within the system. And like I said, our team's here, and we can help you through the registration process and whatnot if you need any extra assistance. But the team did a really wonderful job. There's also a very easy to follow employer guide on the site when you log in, as well as short videos. So it takes less than 3 minutes to actually register your organization. I saw it with my own eyes, I can attest to it. And then from there, only a few extra minutes to set up the actual job posting. So we've received really positive feedback on it so far. And like I said, it just provides that extra level of flexibility so you can log in and see what your applicant pool looks like at any time. And for timeline, so we kind of touched on this earlier, but co-op still has students available for the winter term, though we have also begun posting positions for summer 2021. And this will be covered in the next slide as well, but for the winter term, we are handling all postings through our older platform called jobs.sheridan, which you may be familiar with. So any jobs that you wish to post or any opportunities you'd like to explore for the work term, you can reach out to us at the email address noted here, sheridanworkscoop@sheridancollege.ca. And for the summer postings, those will all be done on the new Sheridan Works platform.
Kind of a best of both worlds scenario. So a couple years ago, I engaged in some work, and the co-op team did, with a bit of a marketing firm as we worked on Sheridan Co-op's branding. What's our competitive advantage? Why do we stand out? And what was stunning about the research that came back is our employer community and our students said effectively the same thing, that what really differentiated Sheridan's approach to student employment and co-op and engaging with the employer community was relationship, was the willingness to hop on a call and walk through options and explore possibilities and act as a partner in the process. The new Sheridan Works, and our students actually said the same thing, that it wasn't, hey, you've got a work term in the summertime, when you find it, let us know. They were able to talk through their career goals and their passions and why they chose the program in the first place. So the Sheridan Works tool is really exciting in that our old system did not allow the employer community to log into it and to engage with it directly. So the ability to automate some things, to be more efficient, to have real-time access to all of that, we're really excited about. But we are committed to making sure that we in no way lose what made us special in the first place. So that ability to normally we would visit, but maybe again in the future. But in the meantime, to do one of these calls and just ask questions and say, hey, this is what I'm really looking to achieve. What's the best way to go about it? Here's the skill set I need, or the software I need a student to know, which programs learn it. Those types of discussions and dialogues we think are really, really important to being a valuable partner for our employer community. So we're happy to have a tool that kind of mirrors the standard of quality that you'll get in your direct interactions with the team. So again, on my theme of Sheridan is a big place, applied research, capstone projects, all of those things we engage with quite a bit because they are part of how we interact with the employer community. Our applied research area specifically is fantastic at navigating research funding. So there's but they are a separate department. They are a separate area. So our hope is that we can act as connectors for you. So even if you look at an inquiry and go, it's not grad employment, and I don't think it's co-op, I'm not sure what it is, send us that anyway. And an email address we've set up to kind of act as that front door to Sheridan for the employer community is this one, Sheridan Works careers at sheridancollege.ca, or we'll make sure that you have my email and Katie's as well, so that we can support all of that. So we're back. I'm just going to pull open the chat because I saw some exciting stuff happening. Yeah, and it looks like Katie's following up on that inquiry that came in before Christmas. The Sheridan closure was relatively lengthy. We're back just last week, so we'll check on the status of that for you. Other questions about how we can take the talent that Sheridan has in its students, ranging from the arts to IT to business to computing and beyond, and lend some of that talent in one capacity or another to your organizations. The floor to you.
I have some questions if no one minds, and please jump in. Again, thank you so much for this information session. I know Cory and Katie and I happened to get connected today in an email, so timing is awesome. And it's great to see so many familiar faces to these other Edge ventures. So like I said, I've never done this before. I'm feeling like, am I missing some deadlines? And I'm so grateful for Maya's question. So maybe could you please help us for this winter term? What's the timing like? If we're trying to get a student or students for January to March, are we behind? Do we have like a week? How does that work? Maybe best just to reach out to you by email.
Yeah, so we are not as deadline driven as some of the co-op processes you might have interfaced with in the past, and we're becoming less and less so as we lose control over the external environment. So I guess what I mean by that is if you've worked with Waterloo, which is the biggest and most giantest co-op machine that we have, they work on a ranking system where there's a date where the postings go in, and then all of the matching happens on a certain date, and then there's a second round, and it's very structured in that way. We've been advertising our winter positions since probably September, October, on a bit of a first come, first serve basis. So the job postings go up, the students apply to things they're interested in, and once they've accepted something, now they're done, they can't change their mind, and the number of available students decreases over time. We still have a large number of students still available, and if I felt like we were at the point where all that is left is students that don't have the skills and are struggling to find work, and that's why they're still left, I'm honest and crass enough that I would tell you, but we're not there. We have really good, dedicated, committed, hardworking students that are unplaced simply because a global pandemic reduced the number of available positions. That's where we are right now. So what normally acts as our deadline is the date by which the students can no longer achieve their minimum hours. So in a diploma where a student needs 360, normally we would say they must have found their job and started their job by mid-February. Because if a student started a job by mid-February and they worked 40 hours a week, they would actually hit 360 hours by the time they came back to school, or the semester ended at the beginning of May. We're actually more flexible with hours now. So we could probably go as low as 200 total hours if we had to, and that might mean a student could start in March. What happens though is two things. The talent pool shrinks over time, and the value you as an employer decreases as the length of the experience shortens, because you've just got less time to it's going to take time to onboard a student, train a student, get value out of that experience. So I think we should start exploring these opportunities as soon as possible. Once you send us a job posting though, for the winter, I suspect we could get a full resume packet of interested applicants to you in less than a week. We could schedule interviews in less than a week, and we could process job offers in 24 hours if we had to. So from posting to a student hired and started in a week and a half to 2 weeks is not unreasonable. We've developed the model to be as efficient as possible. So you haven't missed any deadlines. Deep breath. Students are still there, and we suspect they'll continue to be for a while. But we're happy to kind of start engaging in those discussions as soon as possible, just so we can make sure you have access to the deepest and broadest possible talent pool.
Thank you. And I think just additional information for context, for me anyway, when you say co-op, these students are not taking classes right now, or are they balancing?
No, so the students that we're looking at for the winter work term are intended to be only working on their co-op jobs. So they'd be available for full-time hours up to 5 days a week throughout the full winter semester.
Gee, I feel for them, like the empathy, that they're struggling to find a place because of what's happening. Okay, so yeah, let's work together. It's like, how many roughly do you know off the top of your head, how many students, and do you know which specific categories or faculties are looking right now? As I know some are not in the winter term and only in the summer term.
Yeah, that's a great question. Katie, do you have some of that handy, or do you want me to see what I can find from our last meeting, maybe?
Yeah, I can pull it up right now. Just to do a quick reference.
Thank you. It just might help us, say, okay, if we're trying to do things as quickly as possible, then we know which specific faculties, and we can start thinking. Because honestly, I think my job posting would be very much crafted with your partnership.
And that's fine. The team's gotten really good at that piece. So yeah, happy to help with even kind of what job duties are appropriate, what have they been taught, how can we create those alignments for sure. Katie?
Thank you. Yes, okay, so I can see here that we still have students available for applied computing co-op positions. So for example, we have information system security, mobile computing, software development. There's many programs within that umbrella that we are currently seeking employment for, as well as applied engineering. So that could be electromechanical, mechanical, environmental control, those types of programs with students that are currently seeking work, as well as business co-op. You may recall from the earlier slides, that's accounting, HR, marketing, finance. There's a number of programs there. And community and liberal studies, so exercise science and health promotion. So again, just given the nature of things right now, although we do have many students placed, we do have many also still trying to find work for the current work term. So if there's anything that sounds potentially interesting to you, just reach out. We'll let you know exactly what we have available and help you to get those job postings up and try and work with you to find the funding that will allow you to do so.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. Sorry, am I interrupting?
Oh, heck no. Go ahead, Besma, please.
So it's kind of relates to the fact that so a lot of the programs that Katie mentioned are from the applied science and technology faculty. And so I'm aware that I believe in that faculty and animation, arts and design, that there are certain programs that require either the employer themselves or someone on their team to have a background in that area. And sometimes the ventures might need an animator, might need someone who can do coding and web development and that sort of thing, but they themselves don't have that background and they don't have someone on their team. So can you speak more to how that would work in that case? Would it be, is it possible at all, or it's a big no-no?
Okay, so for co-op, we generally don't have a requirement as to the credential or previous training of the supervisor. That said, though, co-op is designed to be a learning experience for the students as well. So it's kind of where employment and education come together. So yes, the students are expected to jump into their co-op positions and add value to your organization. But at the same time, we want them to be learning and growing and expanding through the experience. And sometimes that's more difficult to achieve if the student is the expert in the work that they are doing, right? So if they have a problem or a question, to where do they turn? So we often get into discussions with our co-op employers about where we might find mentors. And if it doesn't exist in the organization, is there somewhere else where we could find that? for the student? Is there a faculty member that could maybe stay attached to it? But it's less of a formal requirement and just of kind of best practice. I have seen experiences where the student was actually probably the most senior kind of programmer on the team and they were quite successful, but that comes with an element of risk to a degree. So we would certainly help our EDGE partners kind of navigate those decision points. And in some cases, our team will turn to an employer and say, you know what, you really need a grad for this. The expectation level is at a certain level. There's not a ton of supervision and mentorship the student's going to have access to. Maybe a graduate who's further along in their training, a little bit more seasoned, would be a better fit for this opportunity. But we can certainly do that. Where we've seen, Besma, a little bit more of that kind of requirement that there be a mentor working is in the arts. So I'm a good example of this. I love to hire our illustrators, our interaction designers to build really cool stuff. But based on the fact that I just called it really cool stuff, you can tell that I don't have the expertise in that space to kind of help them if they needed help. So one of the things we've done with our faculty partners is said, look, we've got a percentage of our employers that fall into this category. They want the skill set, but they're not in a position to act in a mentorship capacity just based on the technical discipline. Is there maybe a faculty member that we could somehow release from their regular duties to stay attached to a bunch of different projects like that? The other thing I would say is there is a difference here in paid and unpaid. When you have a paid co-op student, they're an employee. So the expectations you would place on any paid employee still would apply. You have work, you expect them to do it, they're a paid employee. Where we would maybe push back a little bit more on a lack of mentorship or a lack of somebody with expertise in their discipline might be on something unpaid, because unpaid changes the dynamic. It's less of an employment opportunity and more of a learning experience. Does that make sense? So the more we shift the pendulum to this is not a job, this is a learning experience, the more important that mentor then becomes. In a paid co-op job, we still look at it, but I think it's unlikely that we would just throw out altogether, this won't work because you're not a programmer yourself. We do have examples where the students have been quite successful working that way.
Yeah, it just the nature of a startup, and you know, especially in the early stage, the founder is wearing multiple hats, and so they're doing everything from admin to strategy to design to everything. And I get that, having been a co-founder of startup in the past, and so sometimes they might not have expertise in coding, for example, but just the nature of what they need to do, sometimes they end up picking up those skills where they know what they know what they want and they can give feedback. And so, for example, I worked with graphic designers. I'm not a graphic designer, but I got the lingo, I got the what I need to get the work done, but I can't do the design myself. So just the nature of startups, they're not going to have specialized individuals in their companies at that early stage. And so sometimes, but then it's also an opportunity for the student who sometimes is interested in working in a startup and growing with the startup by having that ability to learn and grow something potentially from scratch and have their voice have a much larger space than working in a larger company.
And my team does the preparation of the students through a 7-week course and their one-on-one support. And we share that message as well, right? The advantages and disadvantages of large multinational organizations, startups, and all of that. And that opportunity to experience variety, the multiple hats phenomenon that you described, is really appealing to some of our students. So when we talk to our game design students or animation students, they understand that they can go to a large AAA game developer and they might be the person that draws the guns or the trees or whatever. Whereas in a smaller kind of independent game developer, they might be involved in everything from script to character to story to backgrounds to all of those sorts of things. So different students tend to find their spot. And it's one of the things we love about co-op, because sometimes a student comes into college believing that they need to work for one of the big banks. And then they go work for the big banks. And this is not a slight against the big banks, because some of them are wonderful. They realize this is not where my personality, my skill set, my interests lie. I am in this chair looking at the screen doing the same task. And maybe they find a home in something a little bit different. So we do love that co-op gives students the opportunity to explore different industries, different types of jobs, and different stages of kind of companies and employers, because for a student that was part of something as it took off and gets to watch it grow and feel like they in some way contributed or were a part of that success story, that's a really neat place to be. And you don't always get that at RBC because they were big before and they're still big afterwards. So there are some neat opportunities for our students in that space, to be sure. The last thing I wanted to mention is, as Katie was going through the available programs and students, in that computing cluster is about 6 students from our mobile computing degree. And I mention it because in the chat, I saw some people describing their companies and I realized, wow, that's already over my head. Like your description of your company already intimidated me by just kind of the complexity of the work that you do, which is amazing. And our mobile computing students is where we see some of the skill set as it relates to blockchain, as it results AR, VR, some of that training happens in our mobile computing degree. So where you're really kind of pushing the envelope from a technology standpoint, I know our mobile computing students would be really interested in engaging with some of those things. In the summertime, May to August, is when we see our animation, arts, and design programs offer their work terms. So animation, game design, illustration, film and TV. And the one I keep bringing up because I think it's so impressive is our Bachelor of Interaction Design. So in the past, before interaction design, employers would call me and they would describe a job and I would say, you need 2 students. And I wasn't saying that just because I'm selfish and greedy. I was saying that because I felt like they needed a programmer and an artist, right? Because when you design a website, that's where all of that kind of comes together. And interaction design is the first program that really has all of that rolled into one. So they have graphic design training, they have arts training, they know how to do the back-end coding. They are taught all of the really cool ways one can interact with technology, whether it's moving your hand closer and further from a screen or voice activated or all of that sort of stuff. So some really neat options there as well. But the arts are available in the summer, but we're going to start advertising positions for the summer work term as well soon. So in fact, later this month. So if you're interested in exploring something that's maybe more interaction design, animation, game design, we're happy to begin having those discussions now so that you can get your posting in as one of the first that those students will see.
I had another follow-up question. Sorry, I'm just like I know like because I speak to the members at random times, and so there's all these questions in the back of my head. So you also mentioned kind of more of like a volunteer-based work, like connection with students. So sometimes ventures, like irrelevant to what stage they are, they might be like more ahead, but they're exploring a new area where you know they want to work with a student on a volunteer basis. And I've heard the same thing from the volunteer side, from the student side, sorry, also, where they're not sure about an area and they want to connect with a startup. Is there going to be a volunteer space on Sheridan Works where ventures and anyone else who has a volunteer opportunity open can post for it there?
Yeah, we want to have those discussions no matter what. Paid or unpaid, we want to have the discussion. If we can connect you with funding to turn unpaid into paid, believe me, we will, because we really believe the importance of students being fairly compensated for the great work that they do. That said, unpaid co-op is not unheard of. How often you see it tends to vary by program area. Marketing, you might see a little bit. HR, maybe a little bit. Computing, it's much less frequent. But we've seen some employers say, look, I can do an honorarium. I can do $500 a month, or I can do $1,000 at the end of the experience. And we have the ability to share those with students. I think the number of interested applicants is likely to go down. There might be nobody, but we can certainly float it. But we do have concerns around what that means in terms of equity. Not all students are in the financial position, for example, to accept unpaid work. So it kind of limits that talent pool we can potentially reach. But even if you are saying, here's the work that I need done, I do not have the funds for an hourly wage, how might we make this work? please make that call. Katie and her team will help you negotiate. Is there an honorarium that might work? Is there a funding program we can connect you to? Can we get a research grant? Or do we want to run it as unpaid and see if any of the students are interested in it? All of those are options. So Sheridan Works won't have a separate volunteer category. Not to bore you with the Employment Standards Act, that's a terrible thing to do at 6:15 on a Monday afternoon. But unpaid is legal where the work experience is a requirement of an academic program. So if a student's getting grade for it, then you can do unpaid volunteer work. If they're a graduate or something like that, then in all likelihood, it's not permitted under the Employment Standards Act. So that means you can legally do unpaid co-op and field placement because students are getting grades for it. That doesn't always mean that we're comfortable with it, that we feel it's ethical in all situations. So we tend to review these on a case-by-case basis. And where we see an unpaid opportunity, and here's how I would assess them, just to give you some background. I tend to use 3 criteria when I'm looking at something unpaid to make sure it's something I'm comfortable promoting to our students. One would be, does the balance of benefit favor the student or the employer? Who's getting the most out of this deal? And if it leans a little bit to the student side, then maybe that's something we would explore as an unpaid opportunity. The second would be, is the student receiving training and mentorship similar to they would in an academic program? So if a student's got an unpaid job that involves sitting at the elbow virtually or in person of a practicing professional that shows them, here's how this is done, here's how this is done, and they're being brought along and kind of mentored along the way, we'd have more comfort with that than an employer that says, welcome to this unpaid job, here's a giant stack of papers, get them to me by next Friday. That's a different relationship and one that we would normally expect to be paid. And the third would be, does this unpaid gig replace what would normally be a paid job? So we don't want to see our labor market impacted by what normally people used to pay for turning into unpaid internships. We don't want to be the tool that undercuts the overall labor market that our graduates move into. So that's kind of how we would navigate all of that. I probably gave you more detail, Besma, than you were asking for. But I think, again, the moral of all of these stories and all of these questions is usually maybe probably let's talk about it, and we're happy to work on exploring a number of options with the various EDGE members and partners.
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that, and we're definitely not calling for a lack of equity between the students. It's actually not what I was asking. It's what I was asking is because I'm with co-op. It's also the number of hours that the student needs to fulfill. So I was asking more around if a venture is interested in having something like they want to volunteer on the side. Sometimes the student wants to do something on the side just as extra learning, even if there is no payment. So it's not something that they're doing for 400 and whatever hours a term. It could be just a few hours here and there. So would there be a volunteer board on Sheridan Works for these kind of positions where it's not replacing a co-op or internship?
See, sometimes I answer a bonus question. That last one was free. So the Sheridan Works has a co-op job board and a general job board that where we expect to see part-time jobs there, graduate employment, all those sorts of things. Now, again, unpaid would be vetted. So if it's unpaid for not-for-profit that's running some sort of a charity event and they need a volunteer, we would advertise that. Some sort of short, I just need someone to pop in to volunteer, kind of a community thing, we might advertise that. But unpaid jobs are not likely to be advertised there because it probably doesn't meet the Employment Standards Act. So where we're looking at kind of charitable, not-for-profit things, we might be able to share those. Otherwise, it's actually easier to do unpaid through work integrated learning, through co-op or through a field placement, than it is to just offer an unpaid gig to a student, because that's where actually the rules suggest one ought not to. Where there's a curricular element and a grade being assigned, there's actually more flexibility for unpaid in that space.
There's a question in the chat box from Bhairavi. Is there a standard list of what graduates in each of these programs make at an hourly rate? It would be, or in the market generally, it would help gauge how much to pay them that's fair and account for when planning on funding, et cetera.
That's a great point. I think we have some fairly decent resources for co-op. We'll share that. I will admit that tracking graduate employment has been an area of weakness for not just Sheridan, but all of the Ontario colleges of late that we're looking to improve. So graduate employment rates and wages tends to be a little bit more anecdotal, but we can start with co-op wages to start and see if that helps you. We tend to break them down kind of first work term, second work term, third work term. So we do have some resources that I suspect would be helpful, and Katie's team that works with these programs directly tends to have really good knowledge, even of their grads, because when you've got that co-op advisor that helped you get your first co-op job, helped you get your second co-op job, when you get that grad job, you tend to write them back and go, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Here's the job that I got. So they get a lot of that feedback from our graduates as well. I don't know why this is them typing, by the way, for those of you watching me on camera. They type that's how I type too, very aggressively, very loudly. Yeah, we do have some information we can distribute to the group. Thanks for asking.
Hey, thanks, Cory. Thanks for that bonus question, bonus information actually. So that kind of triggered me a point. So we're also trying to evaluate an alternate path of research-oriented exploration. How does your team kind of help us with that context? Do you guys even play a role? And if so, what do we need to be aware of, at least from that context? I know, because one of the points you did touch upon was like, if you would probably engage a research student, one, he'd probably be at a higher skill level or a knowledge level. Two, there could be possibility that, because you're exploring, it may be like between a paid or unpaid. We'd have to figure that out. So what else can we need to be aware of, sort of things, so to frame up what we are looking for?
Yeah, so we tend to partner with our kind of Sheridan undergraduate research area. They can often connect companies to research grants and those sorts of things. And there are some really good ones. A lot of them used to be very university exclusive. We've noticed that trend changing. So there are more college research grants than there used to be. But regardless, a lot of times what happens is undergraduate research goes and finds funding. The company then has a funded project. And then they say, okay, now I want students to work on this research project. What's the easiest, fastest way to do that? And the research area often says, hire them as co-ops. So it's not at all unusual that our co-op students work on research projects, either funded or unfunded. And effectively, it's like any other co-op job, except their job duties are more exploratory in nature, right? So our degree level students get really good training in research methodologies. I can certainly direct you to some that are probably better suited to it than others. But we can do research through co-op jobs, or in some cases, we have employers come to us. We had 2 or 3 last week, Katie, that had research funding already in line and research projects already developed and mapped out. They just needed the student talent to do the work. And doing that through co-op is absolutely possible as well. Raj, did that answer your question? Or?
Yep, it does. So I picked up the third point is there is a possibility for research funding, and it could be possible through you guys, because if we don't find any. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. And there are other ways to do that as well. So we'll look at it for co-op first, because I'm a super selfish guy, but a lot of the programs at Sheridan include like a capstone project as something the students do in their final semester as a course. So often those are done with industry partners where they bring a real world problem that doesn't have a solution to it yet and say, we need a team of students to explore potential solutions for this and pitch us an answer at the end or prototype it or whatever. And there are some areas that we could explore that are a little bit more kind of project-based in teams that aren't so much an employment relationship, but an academic challenge to the students.
Okay, yeah, so that's useful. And when we're talking about these capstone stuff, we are also sort of covering the technical aspects, right? So the technical projects, or is the capstone limited to certain faculties only?
Yes.
Programs only?
Yeah, because it's a course, some programs have it on their program map and some don't. So in applied computing, software development, systems analysts, they have a lot of capstones in their final year. I saw in the chat, the School of Business has a number of kind of business capstone type of concepts that they explore, and industry projects. It's less common in the arts. I don't think I'm aware of too many The animation program does a self-directed film. Illustration does kind of self-directed projects, but an industry tie-in is less common. There tends to be computing, engineering through the Center of Manufacturing and Design Technologies, CAMDIT, that Besma mentioned in the chat there, and business is where you see this commonly. But they're all administered by different faculty members in different places, so they're often hard to find. So Katie and I are happy to help direct traffic.
Awesome, that helps. Yeah, I'll reach out to you guys.
I also, within my role at EDGE, is to help connect to capstones and other projects. Now, it's because it's run differently by different faculties and different programs. There isn't one central place. So Raj, you and I can talk more to see
Sure.
what could happen. I can't promise you anything in like this term, but I have chats with profs from all faculties all the time about establishing these connections. So it might kind of chop some time to
yeah, awesome. Yeah, that helps.
Always approach the professor directly, but it is we need a map.
Yeah, I know. I know it's already taken a huge time. So I've already tried once, and I said, "Oh, this is going, way too long." So that's why I asked this question, because I wanted to know if Cory, Katie, or yourself would, in some fashion, be able to kind of help us navigate, so we are able to get faster to what we want.
Yeah. So feel free to reach to any of us. I think we can all.
Awesome. I'll do that. Thank you.
Integrating employer challenges into curriculum. So to be blunt, in an academic institution, curriculum moves slowly, right? So to integrate something into curriculum, it can be done, sometimes takes some exploration, some time. Co-op, because it's already pre-built, tends to be a little bit faster to get right in there. And then the final piece that I would maybe say on that is those types of things that used to be capstones or used to be projects, we're now exploring as co-ops. That kind of, what if we took a team of students and gave them a big picture challenge and just set them loose on it for 4 months and had them maybe work through human-centered design modules and apply that to your challenge and with maybe a pitch at the end. There is a shortage of available jobs. So if those sorts of challenges or projects could take on some of what's missing, we're happy to explore that.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that.
And I see that some really nice feedback from Jacqueline there, pointing out that the marketing management graduate certificate has students design a marketing plan for industry partners. So thank you, Jacqueline. It's an excellent point to raise as well. So as go ahead, Besma. I see a yellow circle around you.
I was just going to say, in the interest of time, if we can do one final question. Or start to wrap up if there are no other questions for now.
No, I would like to say the session was really good, informative, and thank you for giving us a lot of information.
Thank you. I was expecting Cole to start playing the music when I was out of time, but that's okay. That's okay. No, that's fantastic. We do, if there's one final question, happy to address it. Otherwise, we've got a whole bunch of takeaways. We answered as many questions as we could today, but part of the benefit for us was not just to share answers, but to figure out better what you need, right? So we understand there's a need for more information about wages. There's a need for something that simplifies the confusing world of funding, our list of programs, when the students are available, all of those sorts of pieces, and then supports for graduate employment as well, especially wages and funding supports there. So we have your contact information now, and you have ours. So we'll make sure that two-way flow of information continues after the session. And Besma and Cole and the whole team at EDGE, just want to thank you for pulling this together. We love working with the EDGE staff as well as the EDGE Ventures. This is a great opportunity to connect with you all, and nothing but respect for all of the work that you're doing under challenging external circumstances. So thank you all for taking the time out this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cory and Katie. This was awesome, very helpful, very informative. I'm seeing a lot of claps, silent claps on this screen.
Yeah, Katie, did you want to wrap up from your end?
Sure. Just Cory stole most of the words right out of my mouth there, but thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your evening to join us tonight to learn more about co-op opportunities with Sheridan. Again, I can't stress enough, if you have any questions, please don't sit on them. Just reach out to us. We want to help you. So reach out. We'll be happy to assist you in whatever way we can.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. Thanks for attending this evening. Thanks to Cole for all the work in the background. Cole did post a link for a feedback form, so it'll be awesome if you take a second to fill that up, and it'll just help us improve sessions in the future. And we'll be sending the link to the recording and all these other documents that Cory and Katie mentioned. Once I get them, we'll also include that as a package and send it off to all of you.
I do want to make mention that if you are not currently in Edge Venture, please feel free to check out our programs via our programs page that I've also put in the chat. We have plenty of wonderful programs, just like Besma mentioned earlier in the session. So feel free to check us out there too.
Awesome. Thank you all very much and have a good evening.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you so much. Talk